Okay.
We're going to talk about the Moir name and maybe start as early as you can remember where the Moir name comes from, and a combination of names. Too,
Okay.
obviously.
All right.
How far back do we know?
Okay. I better start with where we are. Let me start that way. Hi, everyone. This is William G. Moir, M-O-I-R, 90 Lime Road, Hanover, New Hampshire. And we're out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's the day before Thanksgiving of 2002 at the home of my oldest son, William Douglas Moir, known as Doug. And we're looking forward to a great turkey dinner tomorrow with a number of people from this area, including Douglas's in-laws. Doug asked me to think back for about my ancestry. Therefore, I presume this will be viewed by my successors, my children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so forth. So what I talk about today basically is your ancestry as well, however interesting it may not be. So turn me off if you want to. I'll do the best I can. I'll start with my father's side of the family. He was from Scotland. He was a William Moir. I'm William Moir, William George Moir, and I even have a grandson called William George Moir, the son of my second son, Jim Moir. Anyway, I don't know the exact years, but I know that there was a William Moir in Montrose, Scotland. Montrose, incidentally, being on the east coast, the North Sea side of Scotland, about halfway between Edinburgh on the south and Aberdeen on the north, about halfway. Seaside town, strange as it may seem, it's a coastal town that is a seaside resort, even though you have cold water. But apparently they have golf links there and so forth.
What sea is it on again?
The North Sea.
The North Sea.
Yeah. Anyway, William Moir would be maybe my great-grandfather, so we're going back at least 100 years. Apparently he was a wine merchant as well as a wholesale grocer. He apparently was somewhat well off in that he had a good-sized house in what they call High Street, which is always the main street in these Scottish towns. And they always give names to their houses in Scotland. And this was a 3 or 4 story house, and it was called the Hermitage, whatever it was. And Granny Moir and I have been there once, and then he also had. And this is where I stayed in 1927, which we'll go into later on. When we were visiting in 1927, I stayed at a place about 3 miles out called Netherby. And it was in a little hamlet outside of the small town of Montrose called Hillside. So that was my first recollection in 1927 when my father took my sister and my mother there.
How old were you then?
Well, 1927 was 5 years old. I was born in 1922.
I didn't know you went at 5 years old.
Yeah, and
my first memories of your life?
Over there it was, and one of the, right.
I would think so.
And we spent a great deal of time over there, and then we went from there to Germany, where the other side, my mother's side of the family came from. So I was lucky in having some first-hand information. And I'm not talking necessarily theoretically. But going back to Scotland, after so the times went by, and the Scottish in those days had great big families, and then there must have been another William Moir, and then
the William Moir that was a wine merchant.
Yes, I think there was another son named William, and then my father was the son of him.
So right,
I don't.
whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know what
The middle one.
happened in the middle one or what he did, and I think I'm right on that.
So that would have been your grandfather.
Yeah.
Right. You don't know much about your grandfather at all.
Right.
Now, why is that?
Well, I don't. I met him. He had a beard, and
In Scotland? You met
yeah.
him that time?
Well, yes, in
You
1927.
were 5 years old.
Still remember him.
Wow.
Yeah. He he died in 1930, I guess. In the meantime, my father went to school in a local university, I can't remember the name of it, and became an engineer, a mechanical engineer. And like all Scottish children, found that the land was very poor, the opportunities were meager, and generally speaking, many of the sons of the families emigrated. There were 9 in the family, I believe. My father was the oldest, and he emigrated, of course, to the United States. He had one brother, one of the brothers, he had 2 brothers. One emigrated to South Africa, and the third emigrated after World War I to Australia.
Huh.
Then there were 6 sisters, and I think all of them emigrated to London, and a lot of them became nurses, which was one of the big things that women did that had any professional training, and which was interesting because this was just before the Great Depression of the 1930s, and so they emigrated, and very few came back. Some of the women came back as if they were not married to retire there. Others who became widows went back to Montrose. I don't know much about my father's brother who went to South Africa, but he was a mining engineer. That's all I know about him. I did meet my offsprings of them, but I don't know whether you want to go into them or not. The second brother, who was the youngest in the family, my father being the oldest, this young boy being the youngest, went to Australia. And it turned out he was a very poetic type of person. He's very sensitive. And this is very strange because in World War I, which is a very violent war, tremendous carnage, tremendous millions of people dead, and men especially, soldiers. But this man apparently, and I don't know what he did, won the Victoria Cross, which is the highest honor for bravery and courage. And this modest man. Anyway, afterwards, he could make a living in Scotland. He emigrated. In the meantime, he met a beautiful English girl after the war. He went over first, and she came afterward, and they proceeded to have 7 children. And it was during the Depression, and they almost starved. And
I'm getting confused. This is
my father's brother.
Right.
He had 2 brothers.
And one went to South Africa.
And one went to Australia.
And this one went to Australia.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right.
He was starving. He couldn't.
Yeah, there was not much work.
In Australia,
yes.
He's in Australia.
No, Australia. Yeah,
Okay.
with an increasing family and so forth.
Right.
Let's see. A little more about. Yes. Let me say a little bit more about this family, and then we'll let them go. I have a wife named Alice Butts Moir, who was a great correspondent, and my father happened to have a cousin of his come through who was a medical doctor, he was a genealogist, and he went all over the world trying to make Moir connections, and we met him, and my wife gave him a Christmas card or something, and that allowed us to correspond with his children. And then eventually she and I went over to England. We met them, and met their children, And then we started, through her efforts, we started to meet all of these sisters and brothers of my father, as well as the offspring. It was great. We met all but one or two.
When was this?
This was
60s? Or?
Yeah, 60s or 70s, yeah, when you were over there. So, due to Alice's diligence and being able to correspond, I think we met practically everybody in this family at one time or the other, including the Australian contingent. What else about my family?
Your father, now he was an engineer and went to college in Scotland.
Yes, and I could tell you more about him. Yes, he came over, and his first job, interestingly enough, was in the Holland Tunnel, building the Holland Tunnel under the Hudson River Bridge between Manhattan and the Jersey Shore. And that was his first job he was able to get.
What kind of job was it?
Well, he was working on the electrical units there, even though he's a mechanical engineer, and apparently he almost was electrocuted, scared him to death, and somehow he had contacts up with the Edison Electric Company in Schenectady, New York, which became the GE company.
Really?
Yeah.
It was called what first?
Edison Electric, right. And there's Thomas Edison, of course, was the founder of it.
Right.
So he went up there and...
But real quick, back, he emigrated to Ellis Island probably? And
oh yes, all through that.
And did he tell you about when he first got to New York a little bit more?
Well, the only thing he told me was, he tells us on himself, he was after getting off of Ellis Island and walking up Broadway, or Lower Broadway, he apparently did not use the sidewalks, because in the old country they didn't. And so he walked up, and there were basically horse and buggies in those days. There may have been a couple of automobiles. But for some reason, he walked in the street, and all these wiseacre New York said, well, aren't the sidewalks good enough for you, Scotty, or whoever it was? Well, I do remember something about that. My father was a quiet man. As I am noisy, he was quiet. And he went up to Schenectady, and there he met my mother, and we can go into that pretty soon. Okay?
So he went to, how old was he, do you think?
I think he was 24, 25.
24,
yeah.
And he had a connection with the Edison Power Company? And
Edison Electric Company.
They offered him a job?
Yeah, or he must have had friends there. There was connections there of some sort.
Tell us a little about Schenectady. Why is Schenectady there?
Well, I don't know why Schenectady and General Electric got together, but they did. And it became, of course, the headquarters of GE, which became one of the big corporations of the United States, as everybody knows.
It's not still a headquarters, is it?
No,
it's
no.
New York City.
No, it's Fairfield County now. Fairfield, right. Connecticut. But at one time during the war, they employed 50,000 people. And also during the war, there was an American locomotive company, and they made tanks for the Army. And they employed 10 or 12,000, so it was really a big operation for the war effort. I must say that when I was growing up, the population of Schenectady was, at the time I was in high school, when I graduated, was 93,000. And you know how every kid wants to have his locality succeed, and I just couldn't wait. And I hoped that it would get to 100,000, which was a big figure in those days. It's not so much today. Never did reach it. And anyway, after the war, GE tended to, they had union problems, and so they decided to put various divisions in various other parts of the country. Yeah. And
your father came up there to Schenectady.
Stayed up there, yeah.
And he went in an apartment probably. You don't know probably, but
yeah, he was in the motor generator department. And he spent all of his life designing motor generators, big ones. For power plants. He went to Russia during the depths of the Depression, and so these were Hoover Dam. He designed things like that. Not he alone, but in his department.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, he was not. They had a turbine department there, but he was the motor generator department. Yeah.
And he was an engineer.
Yeah,
so he worked with blueprints all day, electronic blueprints.
I guess he did. I didn't know what he did, frankly. Most people don't know what their fathers do.
Right. So he was single, and he was how old? 24 years old
when he came, and
had a good job. And this, what year is this again, roughly?
Well, I suppose.
Before the Depression?
Well, it was before I was born. I was born in 22, so it must have been 1914, 15, and 16, something. That was World War I. He was not in World War I.
How come?
Well, I presume is because of either his age or or his necessity for the war effort. That could be.
So great, but he's there, he's single, he's living there, he's got a good job.
Yeah, and he met my mother. Okay, so I think at this point, we'll stop with the... Oh, I may tell you this, too,
Good.
before I stop the Moir section. And that is through dealing with a lot of Moirs, through Granny Moir's introduction of being able to correspond with all these people, I was able to determine that the Moirs have a coat of arms. And I bet you should be impressed, as was I, although you're not going to be impressed by the makeup of the coat of arms. And what it is it has a heraldry on it and so forth.
What is a heraldry?
Well, it's sort of the herald is the shield of the coat of arms. Whatever it is that contains the motto, and also any other figures that might be on it. And it turns out that it has on it the heads of 3 Moors. These are black people from Africa, and there were profiles of them. You see the curly heads on them and so forth. And underneath it were 3 drops of blood, or underneath their heads. I can't remember which now. And then underneath there was a motto, and also I know it's Veritas, which means faithfulness, I think, but there's something else there too. Eventually I'll give it back to you. And we think that maybe we were slave traders, which we are not proud of, or possibly we worked for English because the English owned Scotland, and maybe we were their assistants, or perhaps we were running the boats through the slave trade. I don't know exactly, but it's this was verified. This shield heraldry we have, and several ways, independence, and it all turns out that we have these 3 Moorish heads with 3 black drops of blood in it and so forth. So that's kind of interesting.
How did you find this out? Where did you see it?
Well, I met a Moir in Chicago, guy my age. When we went out to dinner.
How do you meet him? Just by chance?
Well, I met him at the YMCA in Evanston. Didn't meet him, but heard he was there, and they had left. And so I contacted him because he was the first one I would have met. And
first Moir you heard?
I would have met, yeah. And so we got together, and he was working for Spring Made, I guess, at the time, which is a sheet company. And we met for dinner, and he showed me the ring, or I looked at the ring, and here it was, a ring with, just as I'm telling you, described before, and his mother apparently was a genealogist, and she was able to obtain this thing and made it into a ring. So that was my first. And then my son-in-law, Jeffrey, wanted to get some glasses, and so he wrote away. Jeffrey's a very generous guy. Wrote away 4 glasses, cocktail glasses, which had the Moir shield on it. It was exactly the same as this ring that I saw 40 years before, 50 years before. So it was, and there were other things too, but that was interesting.
Yeah.
So talk about my mother's side. You want to do that?
I guess, and then we'll talk about how your mother and father met.
Well, we can, yeah. Well, I don't even know. I don't know these
things. Okay, go your mother's side then.
Yeah. Well, my mother, I don't know as much about my mother's side as I did my father's.
Her name was?
Her name was Winkler, Winkler, a German name. And all I know about that side of the family, because as you can tell, I'm first generation from my father's side. My father was an immigrant, so I'm first generation. On my mother's side, I was at least second or third generation. My grandfather, he was a Prussian, came from Potsdam. Potsdam, Germany. That is a suburb of Berlin. And I think they were very warlike people, because Prussians were. And because one of my remembrances was going to my grandparents' house just before they died, and dominating in Schenectady, and dominating the living room was this huge colored portrait, a reproduction, I guess, of Hindenburg, von Hindenburg, who was a very famous general. Was it Hindenburg? No. Who, the Prussian general. Anyway, doesn't matter. The 1870, the Prussian-French War, and he was huge picture of him, and he had this military uniform on, and he had this Prussian hat, which had the spikes going out of the thing, and a big, massive frame around it, and so forth.
This is your grandfather, you think?
No, this is
the generations back.
Oh, he wasn't my grandfather. He was a Prussian general.
But what's the connection?
Yeah, Bismarck. Yes, Bismarck. That's who it was. No connection.
Okay, right,
They just liked their military
He
people.
was from that area.
Well,
Germany,
even
the Prussians.
yeah, he was a Prussian.
They were like warlike.
Yeah, the Prussians were.
Aggressive.
What the Prussians did was to unify Germany through various means. Anyway, so they came over. Apparently, my grandfather was immigrated to the States from Germany because he happened to be a mechanical genius, strange as it may seem, because I have no talent in that direction at all. But we have the dog outside here. Just a minute. Okay. It's very easy to interrupt my train of thought.
Sorry.
He was brought over to this country because of his mechanical genius by a man named Steinmetz, Steinmetz. And Steinmetz was a electrical genius. He was imported. He was well known in Germany for being doing all kinds of experimental work in the electrical field. And the GE company imported him over here to employ him over here. And it turned out he was a little dwarf, hunchback, bearded, 3 feet tall, had a huge cigar, he smoked, and he brought over with him my grandfather. And because he was the guy in which he would develop certain theories, I guess, and to put them to actual use, he would have my grandfather develop these machines or whatever. I don't know.
He's part of his team.
Yeah, he came over. So that's how my grandfather came over, and I guess my grandfather was married and brought his wife over. They had, and to Schenectady, directly to Schenectady, and they had 5 or 6 children, all of whom I knew except for one who was killed in World War I.
Really?
And they lived in Schenectady, so I knew them quite intimately. There was, my mother was the oldest, and then there was next one down was Herman, who also was a mechanical genius, such as his father was, and he did a lot of work for the Knolls, Knolls, which is the Knolls Atomic Laboratory, and Schenectady was GE Laboratory.
Atomic Laboratory?
Yeah, this is starting in that direction.
Really?
Yeah. Well, again, he did mechanical things and that sort of thing. And then after that, I think there was Uncle Carl, who was killed in the war, Uncle George, who was always a bachelor, didn't do too well in life. I think he was spoiled, died early.
You met him, though?
Yes, I met him.
As a child?
Yes. He lived with my Aunt Dudu, my Aunt Gertrude, who was also one of the daughters.
These are all your uncles and aunts?
Yeah, I'm talking about that now. And then there was, Uncle Carl, and I guess, and of course, the infamous Uncle Walter.
He's a Winkler, of course.
He was a Winkler. He was the youngest, and he was the most spoiled and so forth. But so it turned out of all these 6 or 7, there are only 4 offspring. My mother had two. That was my sister, Beth, and I. And Uncle Herman he married, but late in life. Bob never married. George never married. Carl was, of course, killed. Oh, then there was, what was her name? Aunt, the one that went to California, Ruin. You'll have to forgive me,
That's all right.
her name. And she had one child who was Joe Ruin.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and then Uncle Walter had a daughter named Dolores Winkler. And then there was, and Gertrude had, of course, Jack Wallace, Uncle Jack, as we know him.
Right, and Gertrude was, well, your mom was the oldest. Gertrude was.
Well, my sister, my mother and she were just bosom pals. They did everything together. And as a result, you probably know that they liked to go shopping, and I had to take care of Jackie. That's Uncle Jack to you, who was 5.5 years younger than I, and I had my friends, and he sort of clung along with and so forth. And it worked out pretty well.
Great, no, that's great.
What else can I tell you about?
Well, let me ask you, did they get together as a family at that point?
Well, my father married my mother. Don't ask me the situation, I don't know.
Right.
But they were married, and
and then you were, I think we're getting towards where
I was born in.
Aunt Beth was born first.
She was born in, she's 8.5 years older than I. Born in
Wow.
1912 or 13.
Really?
So she was always practically a generation ahead of me.
Right.
She she taught school and met Carl.
We'll get to that.
Oh,
You were, where were you born? What hospital?
Ellis Hospital. There's only one in town.
What's it called?
Ellis, Ellis,
You
Ellis
still
Hospital.
There? Still there?
Still there, I guess. I worked there for a summer, enjoyed it.
So you were born, what's your birthday again? April?
1922, April 9th.
April 9, 1922. And so, just time-wise, the Depression started in 1929.
28, 29, right.
29, okay.
It lasted to the inception of World War II, which was 1941, and they started building the armaments up in 1938 and 39, so that worked. We spent ourselves out of the Depression.
So you were, at this time, you were born in a middle-class neighborhood in Schenectady?
For Schenectady, it was middle class, yes, right.
And you had some security and
Well, I lived in a neighborhood. I might tell you a little bit about that because it's so contrasted to what my children went through and also my present grandchildren.
Great.
We lived in a street, some of them 2-story houses, sometimes one, and there must have been 30, 40 houses on the street, 20 on each side, and the street abutted a park, so it was but the park was basically unexploited, so it was wild and it was just wonderful. We were up there all the time.
How far was it from you?
Just the end of the street, and then beyond that, about a mile, we had the skating rink, skating ponds and athletic fields and that sort of thing.
For the high school or just the
No,
town?
this is just for the town.
Great.
Yeah. And anyway, the street was quite typical of those days because there's the middle of the Depression and there weren't too many children per family. People were not having children. They were afraid to have them, I guess, because a lot of people are out of work. 25% of the workforce, and the workforce then was all male, all men. 25% of those were out employed. So you just didn't have a big family because whether you could feed them or not, you didn't know. So recounting sort of who was where on my street, and I still can remember, the first house on the left, no childless couple, the second childless, the third childless, that was our neighbor. There were just 2 of us. The next one had 2. Next one had 2. There were not over 3 in that whole 40 to 50 families on there. But there were enough so that you always had somebody to play with. And you didn't have to be carted over by your mother or father the other side of town. And as a result, you were always outside. You never stayed in. Even in the coldest weather, we had a lot of cold weather and snow up there. We always played outside.
Is Schenectady located on a river?
It's on the Mohawk River.
On the Mohawk River.
Right.
And I'm sorry, and tell us more about were there commercial stores, candy stores, ice cream stores?
Oh, downtown. We had trolley cars. Trolley cars maybe held 75 people, 100 people, nickel and on. And they would go only 5 miles an hour, but we were about 2 miles from town, so it took you maybe 15 minutes to get in. All my children laugh at me, but we always walked to school. There was no school buses. You either had to get yourself there, or you somehow, either by public transportation. In my case, I went to Lincoln School, was the elementary school, 6 blocks away, and we always walked, and always walked home for lunch and so forth. Junior high was about 1.5 miles away through the park, and we would bring lunch, but sometimes we even come back for that. And the senior high school was about 3 miles away, and I rode my bike there, because in order to get there, you'd have to go way downtown in a trolley car, then way up on another line. But it was, part of the course. And
so you ride a bike all year round?
Yeah. Even.
So what happened when it was snowing?
Well, I had a balloon tire bike, and you got to be pretty expert at that. You'd slow down and that sort of thing. And of course, you had good plowing there because it was a snow belt.
What did you do after school typically?
Well, after school, I played football, but that was only in the fall.
When did you start? Junior high, high school football?
High school, only in high school. That was the last 3 years. That's 10th, 11th, and 12th.
That's when it was only available to you.
Yeah.
And so before football, though.
Well, in junior high, they had the usual. Although interesting enough.
But what did you do after school? Did you have friends? Did you go play sandlot? We played sandlot football.
We came back and played around the neighborhood as we did before, up in the park and so forth.
Just to have
we didn't have. There were no organized sports. We did have physical training in high school, or junior high, but no organized sports because there wasn't enough money for it. For example, this is interesting. We had a wonderful junior high. It was the best time of my educational career. And they had a mysterious room, a mysterious door in the basement. And it turned out that this was a swimming pool. Never saw it. But I saw it once, I think. But the reason it was used is because it was so expensive to heat up the water and to have lifeguards and all that.
So it's closed down for a
it was closed down for a whole depression, yes. But that was sort of typical of what. Now, for example, in high school football, we had one coach.
Not like a right.
Not a defensive coach, offensive coach. Just one.
Who were some of your friends pre-high school that you used to hang out with?
Oh, I used to hang out with. I had 2 favorite friends. One was an older friend named Walter Thiessen, Theissen, German, one of 3 children, and he was an engineering type, and got along with him very well. And he had friends. I had a lot of friends in the neighborhood, but I'm talking about special friends. Mm-hmm. And I've seen him as recently as 5 years ago.
Wow.
He was 3 or 4 years older than I.
Huh.
And he got me into Scouts. He got me into Presbyterian Church. And he was quite an influence on me at the time. And then, of course, I went off the service, and then I never came back, really. Then I had another good friend called Charles Schaniger, Schaninger, who is a Catholic, German Catholic, or Irish Catholic kid. And most kids were named Junior. A lot of them were Junior. He was a Junior, being the same name as his father.
So
anyway,
you called him Junior then?
Always called him Junior.
Until they were adults. They were
well, even he's still a junior to me.
Yeah.
But he had a father who was very handy, and this is an interesting side bit, I think. Most of you heard this story, but again, it shows you the difference between my generation in the 1930s and 40s, 30s, I guess. And today, in that, his father made this boat, it was a motorboat, which was maybe 12 feet long, 5, 6 feet wide, and it had maybe a 5 horsepower motor on it. And the year that he made that, we said, we'd like to take this and do something with it. And so before he constructed it, our parents allowed us to go up to the Sacandaga Lake, which is about 50 miles north, into a state park. We spent 2 weeks there, tenting and so forth. And to illustrate that we were somewhat responsible, this was only when we were 14 years old, 13 or 14. And so by that time, the next year, we apparently impressed our parents that we could take care of ourselves. And the boat was ready, and so off we went with $10 in our pocket for a month, and we went way up to Crown Point, which is the base of the southernmost tip, almost, of Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain being almost a Great Lake, but it's not quite. It goes from the Hudson River. The Hudson River comes out of it all the way up to Canadian border. At some points it's 10 miles wide. Usually it's only less than that. And it was about 100 miles long. So we put in there, we had a tent, just what kids would like to do.
How many were there?
Just two of us.
Just two of you.
Just two of us. $10. Mm-hmm. And why our parents allowed us to do this, I can't figure out. But it was a fantastic experience. And
what did you do?
What did we do? Well, we went. We went for the first couple days. We spent in a beautiful spot on the west side of Lake Champlain on the New York State line, called Willsboro Bay, big bay there. And in those days, the shoreline was not developed. I mean, you'd go miles and miles and miles. And so we just, in this bay, we picked out a spot, and we spent a couple days, put the tent up just like, you know.
Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, exactly. And then we met some people in the boats, and we'd been invited to their place for picnic or food and so forth. And then we took off from there. If I don't want to go on too much about this, but I will tell you that we started out. Oh, I know the problem we had was that we didn't have a license for this boat. We didn't realize we needed one, or we neglected to, or was it too expensive, because every dollar counted in those days. And so we only traveled at night so that the police couldn't pick us up or whatever. And so we started out from Willsboro Bay, and we got out in the middle of a beautiful, beautiful night. It was about 12 o'clock night, and all of a sudden a storm came up. And so we retreated back into what we thought was Willsboro Bay, and we came onto this island. We were not in danger, but it came up suddenly. And so it turned out that we were shipwrecked. Wasn't shipwrecked, but there we were on this island. I forget the name, but we had learned about it, the history of it, because being in Willsboro Bay, the locals. And they said, this is where escaped prisoners would go to. And here we're there. And so we decided that we would pull the boat up, all wet, and we'd stand watch. I would stand an hour watch, and Junior would stand there, because, well, of course, we went to sleep, and so nothing ever happened to us. And we went up the west side into Canada, and then came down the east side, Burlington, all the way down to Fort Ticonderoga.
Did you stop at Burlington, or just?
Oh yeah, all these places.
Sell a town and get
well, we go out and replenish our supply of peanut. We lived on white bread, peanut butter, and jelly.
That's it.
And $10. We had $6 when he came home, something like that. Didn't like to spend money. Yeah. And in those days, no one ever picked up the phone to call long distance. You just didn't do it. It was too expensive. It was maybe 50 cents.
So you ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for how long? Every day?
A month, yeah.
Three meals.
Well, and then we have ice cream cones along the way, but
right.
It was,
mainly that was.
We had a cereal and so forth. Yeah. But basically, didn't charge, and never wrote a letter home. So basically, we were out of touch with our respective families for a whole month, which is unusual.
At 14.
At 14, 14 and a half, 15, they didn't seem to worry, and we had a grand time. So, I'm doing too much about
right,
this
no.
but it sort of establishes a flavor of what our life was like then. And anyway, we we had to go across the isthmus with our boat to get into Lake George, which is a beautiful lake, and hired a guy for 50 cents for his truck and got the boat over there and started down and finally met our family at the base of after a month.
So one of the highlights of your life.
Yes, it was, right.
Now,
right.
tell me more a little bit about your sister. I know she's 8.5 years older
Yeah,
than you.
she was just a lovely person, quiet, and she married, and she was a school teacher down in, when life was jobs were very hard to get. If you think they're hard today, she finally was able to get one down in New Jersey, in the outback of New Jersey, a place called Succothuna, New Jersey. God knows where it was, for $1,200 a year. She was lucky to get that. And out of that, she had to pay room and board and all the rest of it. And then she eventually was able to come up in this Schenectady area.
Oh, really came back?
Yeah, and there she met Carl Aronson, and and he was an engineer.
So what was she like to you, though? She was 8.5 years older.
Yeah.
So when she was a senior in high school.
I was just sixth grade, something like that. Another aspect here was the fact that I do remember that we had, my mother, of course, did not have, was not employed. So we always had a big meal in the evening. There's always things that modern mothers would not give their children. We always had some kind of a roast, or some ham, or some big meal. And we have cream peas, and we'd always have mashed potatoes, and always have dessert and coffee.
What was desserts like?
Oh, fattening.
Like what were they?
Oh, not ice cream, but chocolate pudding, Jello, make pies, cake.
She a pretty good cook?
Very good cook. All women were very good cooks.
German food, or not necessarily?
Sometimes venison, sometimes she'd have kidneys, sometimes liver, sometimes brains, sometimes sweetbreads. That's where I got these taste for all that, which you never see anymore.
Yeah. Let's go into that. Why don't we see? I mean, back then.
Well, one of the reasons was it was in the diet.
We don't know what those things are, actually.
Yeah.
Sweetbreads. And
Okay, I could tell you if you're interested.
Yeah.
Sweetbreads were lymph glands right
Of a
along
cow?
here. Of a cow, most of this. Sweetbreads were lymph glands. Liver was liver from a cow, or you could have it from other animals. Kidneys.
why would you eat this stuff instead of just the steak or the hamburger?
Well, the steak was fairly expensive.
Okay, it's money.
And, well, we could have had steak.
Right.
It was not as popular as today. Chicken wasn't as popular. The reason we had it was because it was a Germanic food.
Okay, it's not a delicacy, but a normal food.
Yeah, and as I say today, you buy steak. You can buy it from $2 a pound up to $20 a pound, in terms of various degrees of quality. Mm-hmm. When you buy a kidney, it's only one. It's top quality or poor quality. It's just one kind, and those are the things that people cast off. They didn't want, except Germans, I guess. And so they were inexpensive, but they were tasty. They had character to them. So, and brains, calves' brains, wonderful. And we mix them with scrambled eggs and brains.
Would you fry them, or the brains?
Yeah.
To be raw brains and fry them in the pan?
Yeah, you'd have to devein them and all that. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about brains. I'm talking about kidneys. I'm talking about liver. I'm talking about sweetbreads.
Which are what?
Sweetbreads are these lymph glands. Yeah. So all of those, you never see them anymore.
Right.
You just don't see them. It's sort of too bad because they're rich in protein.
But you had those a lot, quite often.
Well, we had them once a week or something like. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just every day. So that was the diet. My sister, again, married Carl Aronson, who came from West Virginia. She had 5 children, all by cesarean, which was quite remarkable. And she also married late. She was 30, I think, which was late in those days.
So you were like 22 when she was 8 years.
Yeah, I was best man for Carl, and he was 40, and I was 20. 24, 25, 24, I guess.
I want to go back to that, but how did Galway Lake enter the picture?
Oh, Galway Lake. Are you sure you want all this?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope you'll edit it now. It has to be edited down to 5 hours, something like
Well,
that.
Galway Lake's important to me because that's where I went as a child.
Right. Okay, Galway Lake. Again, this is, it was a lake, a reservoir, about 16 miles from Schenectady in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains in New York State. And my father, when I was about 3 years old, bought or leased some land from a farmer on this place, and for $10 a year. And he put up a platform, and we had a tent.
Was he the first one there?
One of the earlier ones.
Really?
The first 15 or 20 of them, yeah. Everybody living in tents at that point.
Cool.
And there was one well, and you had to cart stuff in the well. And then he built his camp in 1927, and it's extremely well built because it was built by barn builders, and they used the excess of wood and so forth. 3 bedrooms, which were not separated off, as you know, Douglas.
Yeah, on the top.
Yeah, and a little kitchen, screen porch in front, a living room, back porch, and a little john area. And it was only 3/4 an hour from home. My father would commute during the summertime. We'd spend all of our time up there. Eventually, there were about 100 camps. We call them camps, not cottages. In the New York State, upstate, you call them camps. They may be $1 million place. They're still a camp up there, or very modest in our case. And there were about 100 camps. Each one had 2 or 3 kids. So again, we were surrounded by kids, and you never saw your mother or father until dinner time.
So you were 3 years old. They built this place. Your whole every summer of your youth almost was spent every summer.
Right up until high school, through high school.
You spent all summer.
All summer from right.
Huh.
And
and you look forward to it every year.
Oh yeah,
Great.
yeah. And we always had a custom, and in that we have dinner, and then we go out and play a little bit. And about 8 o'clock, we had a little store up there. I'd come back and find my dad, and I'd ask him, "Daddy, could I have a nickel?" And I'd take the nickel and go up and get a big ice cream cone, or some other thing and so forth. It's always a treat, or some candy.
Was that the same store that was there?
Well, basically, yes.
Same
yeah,
spot.
yeah.
Have you gotten up to your birth yet?
Yeah. We had enough for a while?
No, let's go. That's great. So okay, we're Galway Lake and
Galway Lake. And one of the things that was very nice about Galway Lake was the fact that, as I told you earlier, my mother and Aunt Dudu were very close together, and Aunt Dudu was always an organizer, and she had a lot of imagination, and she put on plays. She would write the play and produce the plays and have parts for everybody that wanted to be in the play and rehearse them. And on the store had a big porch on it, and that's where the play would be put on, and the costumes we made. This is an all summer long thing that adults and children would do, and they had orchestra. Usually it was a musical. She would write it, and they'd write the own music. And one of the campers, as we called them, as an avocation, had a band, dance band, and so he organized people who had any talent. So, for example, my father played the piano, and he was able to get a bass fiddle for him. So my father played the bass fiddle in the band, and then we also had amateurs hours there. And I remember I had to play my violin, which was terrible. people sang and that sort of thing. It was a very cohesive group and so forth. Then we had athletic events. One of my neighbors was a merchant down in Schenectady, and he was able to get the merchants to contribute prizes, huge prizes, and we had sort of all kinds of little marathons for kids and that sort of thing. And then the other thing about Galway Lake is unique, was that it was originally made by the rug companies. The Bigelow Stanford Rug Company and Mohawk were all situated in Amsterdam, New York. That was the rug capital of the world. And all these commercial.
Why wasn't the capital?
Because there was talent there. I guess. Mm-hmm. And one of the prerequisites, of course, there was a lot of wool there made by all around the area. And one of the prerequisites was necessary to have good clean water supply. And so they decided to build this dam, which you have seen.
What's the name of that dam?
Well, it was, I don't know.
It had somebody's name, I remember. Straight across.
Well, that was, but no, the dam was where the dam was held back the water.
Okay.
And they created this dam, and they cut down all the trees. And one of the things and they allowed people to camp around this lake, but they all with the covenant that they could have boats on the lake, but they could not have motorboats, which would make the waters dirty and so forth. So as a result, it's the most unique place in the world, because you can go out there at night in a canoe and not be afraid of being run down by a rotten power boat. And you go out there and you have echoes. It's so quiet in the evening. And then after the war, I'd come back, and it was the sailfish capital of the world. They'd have national regattas there because of the lack of power boats. And to this day, every Saturday and Sunday, they have various classes of boats.
100 boats out there.
Yeah, and it's such a great sight. So that was unique in that respect. We had Mr. Ruback was our farmer.
Right, Ruback's Crow.
Ruback's, Rubacks, and he was a German farmer. Actually, he spoke good English, but and he was a good-hearted man. He liked his hard cider. He would occasionally be tipsy and so forth. But he milked his cow. He had 10 or 12 cows, and those cows were grazing in this grove of ours. They'd come next to our houses and have cow flops all over the place, which is kind of interesting. We'd have to shovel them up and so forth. And then they'd come back twice a day and go back to be milked. And then we go up with our little milk cans, a gallon milk can, and we go up and watch him milk the cows, and then he'd take the cow milk, fresh cow milk. It was as hot. He'd have to cool it off in his coolers, and then unpasteurized, raw milk, and then he would pour it into our, and then we'd come back and we'd go up and have up and a mile back or half a mile, whatever it was, but we'd sing songs and all that, and it was just another custom that we have.
But when you got back, what happened to the milk?
Oh, the milk was put in.
What was the best part of the milk?
Oh, the cream.
And what did you used to do?
Oh yeah, yes, I would always take this, and it was not, if it was quart bottle, then almost half of it was heavy
the cream would
yellow.
rise to the top.
Oh yes, there's no homogenizing those.
And you liked the taste of the cream?
I liked it all the time, yeah. And we could whip it into whipped cream even though it was just regular cream. Hello.
Momentarily.
Yeah.
Fahtie, you like your steaks well done?
I don't want too much of a steak. I've had a big
it's
meal.
Little.
Okay.
6 ounces.
No, yeah, it's, at least medium well.
Medium.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Medium rare.
Medium.
Thanks.
yeah.
Sort of.
I remember in Galway Lake there was a building called the Ice
House.
House.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well,
I remember when I was there, it was vacant.
Yeah.
We used to get in there and go up the top, and it's been closed for years.
Well, they made fire stations out of them.
Okay.
Remember, we had equipment there. That was very interesting too. This Mr. Ruback was so generous, as I say, only $10 a year for using his property, and Oh, then he would also go up and get chickens. This is interesting if you want to hear a gory story. We'd go up and he'd charge us 25 cents for a chicken. I don't know how much he charged for milk, but 10 cents a quart or a gallon, whatever it was. And he'd go up there and you would select your chicken, the chicken yard. He'd go out and grab it and with his fan, and then he'd get his axe, he'd put it on the stump, bang, like that, and the chicken would go up in the air. Apparently reflex actions. His head was down here. He'd jump 10 feet and then 6 feet and then finally go, and we'd take him home, and then we'd have to, the terrible thing, we would have to defeather them.
How'd you do that?
You put them in boiling hot water and the smell of the feathers, and then you had to pluck the big feathers out, and then the fathers had to eviscerate them and so forth. So by the time he got through, I think that's one of the reasons I never liked chicken. To this day, I still remember that sort of thing. But anyway, the ice. All right, this is interesting. I don't. Oh,
You didn't have refrigerators.
no. This is before refrigerators, or certainly refrigerators up on our second house. Mr. Ruback, in the wintertime, would go down to the lake with his horses. Oh no, he didn't have cars, and he had his sleds and so forth, and he had made ice houses that were maybe 40 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 20 feet high.
Ice houses?
Ice houses, right. And he would fill these. He would go down and cut the ice. They were blocks, 50-pound blocks or 40-pound blocks, and he would cut it with, and he had a hired man, I think his brother. He would cut them and put them on the sled.
You never saw him do this?
No, I didn't. That was the middle of winter.
Yeah.
And he would cart these up to, he had 2 or 3 ice houses. One was near where we were. And he would take, he would put the ice in these ice houses. And in order for the ices not to freeze together, he put sawdust. Where he got that, I didn't know, around them all. He'd put them all in layers and then go up and up and up so that the top layer may have been 15 feet high, with layers that high, and it was filled with dust. And so he had these doors that had to be 15 feet high, or they'd have a series of doors. And he would let us. He did it for us, and he never charged us. Oh, somebody gave him maybe $2 for a whole year. Most people didn't give him anything, and why he did it, I don't know. But people were that were nice to
So
to each
he had
other.
all this ice in there. What did you do? How did you get it?
Then we, as I got older, I developed a little business. It was 5 cents, I think. I was able to go down with a crowbar. There was a crowbar and a shovel in there. And
Self-service?
Yep. I'd go up there and I'd get it, and he had his tongs, and we'd get them out, and they would throw them down to the ground, out of the ice house. Then I had a little cart, one of these red carts, radio carts, whatever you call it.
A wagon?
Wagon.
A wagon.
Yeah, wagon, yeah. And I would deliver these to, and of course by that time I was maybe 12, and I was fairly strong, and put them in these people's ice boxes for 5 cents a shot. And I had maybe 20 of those, and every 3 days you did that.
Were they were the pieces covered with sawdust?
No, I always had to put them under my pump.
Clean them off.
Yeah, we had a pump.
Right. So you're gonna drink this. You use it for drinking ice.
Oh yeah, yes,
It's
sure,
pure 'cause
sure.
Galway Lake.
Galway Lake.
So you used to deliver it to other camps.
Yeah, the ladies there, and
They'd have ice boxes.
they had ice boxes. Sure, that's right.
How would they work?
Well, they just put them in one. You put them in a zinc container, a zinc area of the box, that would keep it from melting too fast, and it would cool the whole other area.
Sort of cool it, right? It wasn't.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't. Yeah, you couldn't make ice cream out of it.
Right. But did they have real refrigerators other places? Or?
Oh yeah, we had them at home. Yeah.
But here the electricity was not.
We didn't have electricity for a long time. You're right. That's another thing. We were lit by Aladdin lamps, or kerosene lamps, and we had to light them every night, and we had to fill them with kerosene, and there was and wood stoves.
Did you go swimming a lot?
Oh yeah, every day. every day.
Now, what about was there a paved road down to the?
No, there are no paved roads. There is now, but there wasn't then.
There wasn't when I was a kid either.
No, that's
Now
right.
I remember
Everybody ran around in bare feet.
I remember when you, as a child, first getting there, and you had these